This is the Building Automation Monthly Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 179. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 179 of the Building Automation Monthly Podcast. And in this episode, we are going to be discussing 7 tips for growing your building automation accounts. So I got an email the other day. Actually, I think it came through our support group about, hey, Phil, I'm new to the industry. Or actually, I'm not new to the industry. I was a technician, moved into sales. How can I grow some accounts? What should I do as far as growing accounts? How do I just basically start building my portfolio so that I can be able to go and sell to them? And so I got to thinking, right? I've had the fortune of working with some freaking amazing salespeople throughout my career. Obviously, as a business owner, you're constantly selling. So I'm always reaching out and selling to actual contractors and owners, our training services. So I started to think about what has worked for us. What have I seen work for others? What have I learned being involved in some massive project sales pursuits? And from all of that came this episode. So I'm going to look at 7, it may be more than 7 tips, just depending on where my brain goes as we move through this episode. So this week's episode is sponsored by our Building Automation Scoping and Estimating course. So if you are in sales and you are responsible for going and creating scopes and estimates in order for you to sell projects, or maybe you're on inside sales and you're responsible for creating scopes and estimates so you can sell projects, there's really no training out there for you other than learning on the job, or at least that used to be the case until we released our scoping and estimating course. This fully online turnkey course will teach you how to create accurate scopes and accurate estimates effortlessly as part of your building automation day-to-day work. So if you are looking to be able to look at a job, look at the drawings and create a scope and then create an accurate estimate that will help you to win your estimates and your proposals, then you definitely want to check out this course. And you can find out more about it at buildingautomationmonthly.com/179. Scroll down to the scoping and estimating logo and click on that to learn more about the course. All right, so when it comes to growing BAS accounts, I mean, the first challenge I tend to find with folks is that and this is the big difference I've seen between the successful salespeople and the not so successful salespeople. The really successful salespeople, I'm talking the ones who are consistently exceeding their sales targets. The biggest difference I've seen is that they tend to focus on a specific area. Now, they'll either focus on a specific contractor or owner type, or they'll focus on a specific vertical market. And this can be very difficult when you're just starting off because you don't have a huge just backlog of opportunities to work off of. So you're sitting there and you're like, man, I need to go after anything that moves. And that's the temptation to do that. And while I understand that, and I totally get that, especially with salespeople being coin operated, they want to go and make sure that they are making sales so that they can fund their income. However, if you focus on everything, you become an expert of nothing. And when you're dealing with plan and spec work, that's completely different than dealing with design build work. When you're dealing with mechanicals, that's completely different than dealing with general contractors. When you're selling to a healthcare vertical, that's completely different than selling to a K through 12 vertical. And because of that, the folks who tend to niche down and focus on a specific vertical are the ones, or focus on a specific customer type, are the ones who tend to see the most success, because how you can make a lot of money, despite what people may say. You can make a lot of money selling plan and spec work, but there's a specific way and methodology and a set of relationships that you need to establish. You can also make a lot of money selling direct to K through 12 or direct to healthcare. You just need to know about that market. You need to be connected to the right folks. You need to understand the business problems so that you can penetrate higher level decision makers so that you have a higher likelihood to close your business. I really hope you just captured that, because that, in a nutshell, if you embrace that, will really set you up for success. So from there, let's move to some tactical tips here. One of the biggest things I see, and these are going to oscillate between tips for actual businesses and tips for the individual salesperson themselves. This tip is actually for a business from a strategy perspective, and it's to always follow new construction work. One of the benefits of having the amount of students we have, and myself being as experienced in the world of BAS as I am, is that not only do I understand what folks are going through as far as managing a P&L and growing their sales and growing their ops teams and making sure that they can survive day to day, but I also get to see how other organizations are doing it, or in some cases not doing it. So what I've noticed consistently is that when we look at construction work, so back in 2008, we had a lot of margin pressure, right? The contracting world tends to lead 12 to 18 months. And so right about 2009, midway of 2009, all the construction opportunities started to dry up and we started to shift towards more operational work. So owner direct stuff. And what that did is that drove margin pressure, because what some folks don't realize is that the GC has margin, and then the mechanical has margin, and then the controls contractor has margin. So we have what's called margin stacking. And that's why you see pressure for controls folks to be anywhere from 10 to 20% on their margin numbers, just depending on the metro, the type of project, the type of delivery model, etc. And so then from there, we see with owners, because we don't have that margin stacking, we're able to actually have higher margin. The owner ultimately is paying the same cost that they usually would pay. We're just able to capture more of that margin, more of that share of wallet, because we're direct to owner. So what does that mean to you as a business owner? Well, you should have a process to ensure that you are transitioning from construction work to owner work. This is key. If you aren't doing this, if your team is saying, well, we don't have a service group, so we're just not going to go after service, and you are not going and saying, all right, this project's in warranty, we're going to transition this to the service group, then you are missing out on a predictable source of revenue that is highly profitable. And you're also missing out on a couple other things. So first off, let's talk about what you're missing out on, and then we'll talk about some strategies to actually follow new construction work with service work. So the first thing you're missing out on is more revenue. I mean, that I just said it. You're missing out on more revenue. You're missing out on profitable revenue. Second thing you're missing out on is a connection to the owner. So you're missing out on the opportunity to be connected to the owner and to be able to actually be involved in things like capital planning, understanding their business problems, understanding conversations on retrofits, service calls that can turn into mini projects. There's a lot of opportunity of revenue you're missing out on. And the third thing you're missing out on, so the first thing, right, is you're missing out on revenue. The second is you're missing out on owner involvement. The third is you're missing out on favorably positioning yourself for future work. So if you're working with the owner and you understand their problems and you're actually providing value after the project, you're helping them go and design standards for their BAS, you're helping them implement processes to solve their problems. This is also why I highly recommend you focus on a market type, because the problems at healthcare are completely different than the problems in K through 12, are completely different than the problems in transportation. And so by understanding these problems, you're able to create use cases and solutions that you can then communicate to director level, executive level folks, and actually go and get yourself favorably positioned in the specifications, especially when it's public money where it's required to go through a bid process. So it's really important that you do that. But how do you service work if you don't have a service team? Well, I'm not going to spend a ton of time unpacking this because this could be a whole nother episode of how to establish a service team. As a matter of fact, I think we've recorded that episode before. But what I want to focus on is that just because you don't have a dedicated service organization does not mean that you can't transition operational folks into service roles. This is why you should always be forecasting, always looking at your backlog, always understanding when you need to staff folks up and put folks on a bench so that they have, or to staff up your bench rather. So that way putting folks on a bench and underutilizing them would be a bad idea. But you want to staff up your bench so that way you have folks to fall back on. That way you can grow your business and execute backlog. And you can take these folks and you can shift them into some of the low risk work, some of the install work, some of the startup work. And then you can take your more experienced folks and switch them into the service owner accounts. And that is how you grow a service business organically without starting a quote, quote, service group. So tip number 2 is to understand your customer's culture and organization. Now, I always feel kind of weird and new agey when I talk about culture and organization. I don't know why that is. I should probably explore that, but I always just feel kind of weird. Maybe it's just got a bunch of connotations to it. But there's a lot of truth to understanding culture and organization of your customers, whether they be mechanicals, generals, or owners, or architects, or engineers, or whomever they are. Because when you start to understand this and you understand how they're organized, you are then best able to help them both on the construction side as well as on the service side. You know, if you understand that your owners are largely, let's say they're all 60 years old. They are all getting ready to retire. They may be at a hospital. They're starting to retire. They're not backfilling roles. They don't have a dispatch. That is a perfect opportunity for you to augment with a planned service agreement and maybe putting one of your people on site. That is a perfect opportunity for you to assist them, but you would only understand that if you understood how they were organized and you understood what they were doing as far as their own internal talent planning and contingency planning. A lot of folks don't think about this. I know it takes time, but by going and investing a little bit of time, it doesn't take that much time to map out your customers' organizations, to understand how they are currently servicing their own internal customers, then you are better able to serve them. The same goes with engineers and mechanicals and generals. Everyone's getting caught up in the smart building and unique ways of delivering projects. And if you are an expert in that, you can augment your own contractors' capabilities and form up relationships with them and basically team up with them to help them win work. So that is another strategy flipped to the construction side instead of the owner side. So tip number 3, and we've talked about this a lot, but it's one I want to reiterate because it's just really important, and that's to individually pick a focus area. So this is where I see a lot of really good salespeople perform, and this is something that it took me personally a while to figure out. When we started our business, I went after anything and everything, which, you know, I kick myself in retrospect doing that. And you're kind of, like I said, you're a new business or a new salesperson. You need to make revenue. You got to pay bills. You go after any opportunity that moves, despite how good that opportunity may be a fit for your company or not. But nowadays, much more selective in the opportunities. I want to engage with companies that are committed to developing their teams, that are committed to understanding that, hey, we need to form a bench of people. They buy into our approach of training. They buy into employee development. They buy into the value of increased time to revenue, or decreased time to revenue rather. And they buy into those values. And because they buy into those values, they make a good fit as a customer. Well, it's the same for you, right? You want to focus in on something you connect with. Maybe you're passionate about K through 12. Maybe you're passionate about dealing with mechanical contractors. Maybe you're passionate about going and dealing with engineers. Maybe you're a more technical person and you really like the idea of spec writing and technical design. Figure out what you're passionate about and then dig into that area. If you're passionate about engineers, join the local ASHRAE chapter. Get involved in teaching those local engineers about how to implement good sequences of operations and how to plan for IP controls and all these new advanced technologies, how to build SaaS technologies into their specifications. By providing this value, you are going to have influence over the spec, and influence over the spec is one way of winning work. So you want to focus on an area and then use that focus to develop yourself in your metro. And so that's like your local city area as the go-to expert. And I will tell you, having personally recorded over 170 plus podcast episodes, having written a book, having created 11 online training courses, having spoken at multiple conferences, the difference between an expert and someone who's not an expert is in the margins. It's not as hard as you would think to move into an area of expertise. I feel that and this is a feeling. I have no factual data to back this up, but I'll toot my own horn. A lot of my feelings have been correct. And I feel as if the fact that we have so much information at our fingertips really allows us to expedite that step into the expert role because we're able to fast track that experience. We're able to use message boards and white papers and YouTube videos and everything to learn from others' experience and really fast track our way into at least technical expertise. You can't develop relational expertise fast. You have to develop that over time. But at least we're able to go and fast track that technical expertise. And I really encourage you to go and do that and step into that expert role, as uncomfortable as it may be. From there, I encourage you to do tip number 4, which is to be where your customer is. Be very strategic about where you place your time and spend your time. If your customer is an engineer, be at the ASHRAE meetings. If your customers are owners, be at the BOMA meetings, et cetera, right? You need to focus on where your customers are going to be. I don't think I have to expand this tip very far. I think everyone listening to this, I mean, you all are smart folks, and you understand that if you're dealing with building operators, you probably want to be at the building operator meetings and not at the local engineer meetings. So whatever your focus area is, you want to be engaged in that. You want to read the same periodicals they read. You want to set up Google alerts for the topics that they would be searching so you can understand. For example, with K through 12, so when I looked at K through 12 work, one of the things that actually helped my career survive 2008 was doing retrofits and energy retrofits and taking advantage of energy dollars for K through 12. And so what I would do is I would go and research how other K through 12 organizations were getting energy dollars to fund retrofits and operational and using operational budgets to do retrofits. So study how other owners or contractors of the type that you're focused on are able to successfully procure business. Because if you're able to help folks get bond money or grant money, or you're able to help folks win opportunities, then you are going to be favorably positioned to win that work. I hope that makes sense, because that is really important. And it leads us in to tip number 5, which is to understand your tool belt. you really need to be developing a tool belt. I mean, yes, you can sell off of relationships and personality. I've seen salespeople be successful doing that. But at the core of it, the reason they're able to utilize those relationships and personality is because they're immersed in their focus area, their niche, and they understand what questions and conversations to have. So they are able to have conversations with executives or with contractors or with engineers, and they're able to talk about problems specific to that niche because they have developed awareness and they have created tools like knowing how to get money or how to solve problems or how to have organizational strategy meetings or how to get internal sponsorship to actually buy into ideas. And they form these specific to the market they serve. So if you develop that in your tool belt, you will be better able to engage in those conversations and to close business. Tip number 6 is collaborate and build solutions. I don't see enough folks do this, especially on the owner side. You'll see high-end sales executives do this, but your average sales executive doesn't do this enough. They tend to rely on the service technician to do this. And while definitely you can have the service technician as part of the conversation, you should be regularly understanding your customers' problems and bringing solutions to those customers and helping collaborate with those customers to take advantage of the existing systems they have, as well as to develop both retrofits or services or processes that better serve them as a customer. Because if you help them succeed, they will tend to pay back the favor. And so working with folks to build solutions to their business problems, you're starting to see how it all ties together, right? Why you have to be focused on a specific area, why you need to develop a tool belt, why you need to be where folks are so that you understand their problems and can take ideas from other companies and apply those ideas to that company to help them solve a problem. I mean, this is basic business 101, but it's still something I don't see enough newer salespeople doing. And finally, tip number 7, no sales conversation would be complete without talking about understanding your numbers. So you need to understand, where are margin pressures expected to be? Where can you flex on margin? Where can you flex on costs? What strategies can you do to make yourself cost effective so that you can actually win work? If you're in the contracting world, if you're in the owner world, understanding ROIs, understanding basic operational accounting principles so that you can help folks achieve their operational financial goals. You have to understand finance. You have to understand accounting so that you can help folks, especially on the owner side, to play that internal number game so that they can get projects approved, so that they can get things allocated to operational and capital budgets. And then obviously on the contracting side, you need to understand where you can flex and how to work within the contracting realm so that your pricing is effective enough for you to win work. Now, I was pretty sure coming into this that this would be a shorter episode, and it does seem like it's a shorter episode because those are the tips I wanted to cover. However, I encourage you to go to buildingautomationmonthly.com/179 and ask any questions you have related to this topic. I really would love to engage with you about this topic. I feel like this is something that is not discussed enough. And it's something that if you apply these, it will definitely improve your capabilities of selling, both within the contracting world as well as the owner direct world. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate hearing from you all and you all giving me ideas for the podcast episodes. And I appreciate you all engaging and sharing this content. Thanks a ton, and I can't wait to talk to you all next week. Take care.